Hey, it's Dr. Kate Walker, and we are live. It is January 12th. This is your 10 a.m. weekly training. As a Step It Up member, you get this every week. And tell your colleagues who are Step It Up members, you don't have to be on Facebook to be in the weekly training. That's why I do it via a Zoom link. So you can join me right now if you'd like to. You just go up here to featured posts, or sometimes it says pinned posts, and you'll see the Zoom link to join this training. It never changes. Then next week, I'll be doing the weekly Q&A at noon on Wednesday. Again, the link never changes. It's up here if you're a Facebooker. If you are not a Facebooker, again, you wouldn't be here. So, tell a friend. You just go to the Kate Walker Training profile, and it's the lesson called, and I call it number 1, Start Here. So when you click that, you'll see all of the Zoom links, all of the times, all the dates. You'll see the link to our spreadsheet that has all of the trainings in it. So when you join, so if you join this training today, the deal is you can leave your camera off, you can leave your microphone off because I am recording. And then at the end, I will turn the recording off and we will ask questions. So, all right, we got somebody who's coming in. Awesome. I will let you in. So if you want to join, I will let you in as you come in. But again, you can leave your camera off, mic off, and then I will turn the recording and the live stream off at the end if you like, and then you can ask questions. So I'm also going to keep an eye over here. Let me hit refresh, because it just doesn't move real fast on my screen. So if you're asking questions or you're making comments or something like that, I don't see it until the video's over. So if I've got it kind of out of the corner of my eye over here, it's a little bit better. Okay, so today my goal is to tell you about a solution-focused technique to create a motivated client. I know that sounds, kind of ambitious, right? That we're going to create a motivated client, but it's based on some very solid ideas, which comes from Marriage and Family Systems, Carl Whitaker. We counselors have to win the battle for structure, but our clients must win the battle for initiative. Another word for initiative is motivation. And so that's what this technique is all about, right? The structure is, in a first session, we have to get through the freaking intake assessment, right? I mean, we don't have a choice about that. So that's the structure. But if I can ask these questions, this 3-point wrap up at the very end, then I can help the client, even reluctant clients, win that battle for motivation, buying in, collaborating with me on solutions. All right. So what I want you to get from this training, I'm going to show you a screenshot of my intake document. It's an example I used with couples, so you can see kind of how extensive it is. And I'm going to show you a couple of documents that can help with the 3-point wrap up, because that's the fun part of being a Step It Up member. I do give this information at 9:30 in Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses. I give them a little snippet, and then this will turn into a blog, which will turn into a podcast. Podcast drops tonight at midnight. So you'll be able to read this and listen to this tomorrow. But of course, no screen shares and no opportunities to ask questions because it's a podcast. So, and a blog. All right, so here we go. So first things first, what is a reluctant client? And I'm sure the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is an adolescent, right? Somebody whose parents are making them go to counseling. Well, my story is, when I started counseling back in 2004, I thought I was going to work with adolescents, but because my license is called a licensed marriage and family therapist, I was advertising that I was a marriage counselor, and lo and behold, what comes through the door? Marriages struggling with infidelity. So it's funny because, it didn't really matter if it was just a marriage struggling with communication or someone struggling with, having an affair. It's the person who there were two people, the person who made the phone call to come to therapy and the person who came to therapy. Now, you can't be tricked by this. Sometimes the person who made the phone call was being made by someone to make the phone call. I have been on speakerphone quite a few times where the person said, okay, I made the phone call. What do you want me to say? So generally, the person who made the phone call is the one who is the most motivated, obviously, right? And so if you, and that puts you at a disadvantage if you're working with an adolescent, right? Because obviously the person who is the most motivated is not in the room, right? She made the phone call or he made the phone call, and now you got this kind of angry person sitting in front of you. Same thing with a court-ordered client, someone struggling with addiction who had a DWI. Couples, like I just mentioned, if you have somebody that's like, I'm here because he told me he wanted me to come, you've got someone in there who's not quite buying into the process. And so our problem is very universal, right? Nobody likes to be told they have a problem by somebody they just met, right? If I walked up to you and I said, you have a problem, right? That thing that you're doing, and it's, no, right? Your defenses would go up, right? You would say something to me. You tell me to back off, right? Look at my hands. So that's what defenses do. They create space, they create distance, they create an adversary. So what the 3-point wrap-up does, it's not some sort of Pollyanna helmet you're going to put on and pretend like, oh, everything's fine. And it certainly is not an excuse for anything that your client has done or is struggling with. What this is, it's a way to have your client buy in to the process of counseling. I remember in grad school, I was watching a video with Insoo Kim Berg and Steve DeShazer, right? The grandfather and grandmother of solution-focused therapy. And, their technique was they talked to the client. They said, we'll be right back. We're going to go talk about you. They would go talk, and then they'd come back and they would say something like, well, we've talked. And the first thing we want to tell you is you're normal. And you could see the client just go, And I mean, she walked in with issues like she was crying, she's depressed, she hadn't been out of bed in 4 days, she can't work, she can't eat. I mean, what Steve and Insoo Kim Berg said to her was, look, out of 7 billion people on this planet, I mean, we don't have the data, but you're pretty normal. What the client heard was, you're not going to label me. You're not going to tell me I'm a weirdo. You're not going to tell me that I don't fit in, that I'm unlovable, that I'm not valuable, that I don't belong. Right. And so that just changed my whole therapy life, right? As a grad student, I'm like, I got to learn how to do this. I got to figure out how to help people. I think by then I was in internship and I'd faced a few surly clients, right? So what we do in the 3-point wrap up is, oh, hold on just 1 second. Oh, my husband was on a call. I was making sure he's going in his office. We both work from home. Convenient, right? So one of the first things we have to do is we have to make sure we get through the intake assessment. So let me show you mine. And you can see some of the questions that I ask. And this is important because this is giving you fodder for the 3-point wrap-up, right? If the 3-point wrap-up questions don't make sense, you're going to lose them. Like, did you know that, you build a fence out of wood? They're going to be like, where have you been during this session? Were you even listening to me, right? So the 3-point wrap-up has to at least pertain to what you're discovering on your in your assessment. So I'm going to screen share my assessment that I use with couples. So my marriage and family therapy practice is called Achieve Balance. So that's where we get this on the letterhead. You see that one of the most important things, I put a box around it, it's pretty important to me, is who made the phone call, right? I want to know who is the most motivated person. I asked some other questions about living situation, how long they've been in a committed relationship, et cetera. I put a presenting issue for both 1 and 2. And this is probably another training, but I only let one person talk at a time and only tell their story once. I don't allow interruptions or cross-talking in the initial session. I'm pretty bossy. Then I ask questions of each of them. Whatever I ask one, I ask the other. And so I talk about negative things, positive things, and then I ask them to rate many of these things. Now, I don't ask all of these things. I'm kind of at a stage in my career where I kind of know where to go, but this is a great tool. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is awesome, each of you give me a number. And then this is sort of measuring that whole Gottman idea of fairness, who does what and who delegates and who receives activity, chore charts, chore lists, etc. This helps me understand and assess a bit for violence and abuse. I do schedule one individual session with each of them just to ask again. I take a psychiatric history or a psychological history. So I get a lot of good information here about past substance abuse, past issues, family members who have diagnoses of anxiety, depression, or bipolar. And I get that from each. And this is interesting to do with couples because the other one's always going to chime in and say, your Aunt Susie does this. Well, your Uncle Frank is, so you get a lot of good information here. There's a depression assessment if you sense that one or both is suffering with depression, and some suicide questions there as well. And then outside other kind of social behaviors. And this gives a lot of good information too, right? If you've got someone coming in and let's say it's an individual and they don't have a problem, and then you ask them, okay, if a glass and a beer and a shot are all the same, give me an average for a week. If they say, well, I have a glass of wine every night, I'll ask them, okay, how big are your wine glasses? I will self-reveal, even though I'm not a wine drinker, I'll say something like, my wine glasses are huge. So this is a nice, I remember I get to this section a lot with couples, especially when I'm going, I don't know why they're here. What's going on? And then someone will say, well, we do drink a case of beer every night in the hot tub. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get a lot of good information here. And the key is with the 3-point wrap up, right? I'm winning the battle for structure by going through this, but I have to resist the temptation to drill on anything, right? Because especially as a new counselor, if you're a new counselor, man, if something comes up like a case of beer every night in the hot tub, you want to hop on it. You know what? You just met these people. If you start telling this person they're an alcoholic, guess what's going up, right? So breathe as you're taking the assessment, get through the assessment. And then when you get to the end, you've got this beautiful data, this wonderful information, and the client knows you listen to everything, right? They've been through 500 people, 500, that's a real number, who only seem to focus on their problem, right? They don't even feel seen like a real person anymore. So when you take the time to get through, in fact, I should probably call this a 4-point wrap up because this is a huge part of it. Getting through this entire list and listening to every single bit of the story. If you're working with couples, listening to both sides, even in cases of an affair. I'm constantly telling the person who didn't do the thing, didn't have the affair, I'm not looking for causality. I'm not looking for a reason that they did this. There's no good reason to have an affair. This is just helping me understand your marriage, right? I'm constantly having to kind of comfort them so that they understand I'm not looking for the reason that they slept with the secretary in the broom closet, right? I'm trying to help them understand I'm just digging, I'm just gathering information. So now I've got my information. It's time for the magical moment. Great question. So we have a question. Do I have them complete it before the first session, or do I verbally ask in session and then I complete? I have always, even when I was teaching internship to students at the university, I always want my students and I do this verbally. I mean, I've got it down. I can get it done in about an hour, but if it takes me scheduling a 90-minute session, I will, because you never know who's filling it out when it's away from the office. Remember what I said, who's the most motivated party, right? Who do you think is going to fill out the form? Who do you think's voice will be missing, right? So that's a great question. And I know a lot of professors will have people fill it out because it saves time. They want the students to have time doing real counseling. I think this is real counseling because this helps the client understand that you're really, really listening. And sometimes I would tell my students, I don't care if it takes two weeks for you to get through this. Your client, they may tell you, I don't want to tell my story again. But the fact that you're interested in the story is huge, which makes the 3-point wrap up even more powerful. So when you get to the 3-point wrap up, we're going to talk about 3 areas. A spider web or a hair on me. Okay. 3 areas. Number 1, stress. Number 2, life cycle stage. And then finally, the presenting issue. Now, I'll tell you why I saved the presenting issue for last in just a second. So with stress, one of the things I do that I don't have here is I take a timeline. I'll tell the individual, okay, think in the last 5 years, what question am I not asking? So I'm thinking about moves. I mean, and this is stuff that people don't think about. How many times did you move? How many jobs have you had? How many relationships have you had? Have you had anybody die? Have you had anybody get married? Any new babies? Any new grandbabies? So I'll really fill out this assessment by taking this timeline. What I find out is this person has been through a tremendous amount of change. So I'll look at them and I'll say, there are 2 kinds of stress. It's distress and eustress. Body doesn't care if you're marrying somebody or burying someone. It experiences it as stress. And here's what it does to your ability to problem solve. And I'll give them information. And then I'll even refer them to something called a Holmes and Ray scale. And I'll say, it looks like, and actually what I'll say is, what's really jumping off the page here to me is that you have been under a tremendous amount of stress. And 9 times out of 10, if it's an individual, they'll look at me and they'll say, well, I guess I never really thought about it, but yeah, I've been through a ton of stuff. It's been hell, or it's been up and down, or I just thought it was normal. If it's a couple, they'll look at each other and they'll say, we just thought this is what life was supposed to be like at this stage. And as the counselor, you look at them and say, well, it is, if you're a new couple with a baby, or if you're early in your career and you're ambitious and you're building, or, if your company shut down and you have to move and look for another job, right? Or if you're working in an industry like the oil field, where you're on and off and on and off. So you want to validate, yeah, it's normal. That's okay. You're normal. These are the issues one can have, though. So here's the issue an individual can have when they're trying to solve problems. Here's what problems couples can have if they're going through these things, which are normal, when they try to solve problems. All right, so then you get the yes. And when you ask, does that resonate with you? Again, 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. It's interesting. Somebody probably has done a study, right? I think all of the clients, what makes you a client is a very stressful life. So second point on our 3-point wrap up is life cycle stage. We have some data, some research tells us that, some life cycle stages are just harder than others. And we also know that if you don't navigate those transitions cleanly, it's okay. It just puts a lot of stress on the family. Or if you do the transitions out of order, somebody dies prematurely or something happens where you don't get to experience this you give them information about life cycle stages, and you give them data, or you give them research says, because it does. And all of a sudden they're thinking of themselves as, oh my gosh, I'm like everybody else. We're like all the couples who just launched their last kiddo, out of the home. We're like lots of couples who have young kids, right? So you're helping them understand this is kind of what happens when you bury your mother and you're only 25 years old, or your dad's in jail and you're 15, right? So that life cycle stage, again, we're normalizing, we're helping them see themselves as a bigger picture, as a bigger part. And we ask them the question, does that resonate with you? Have you ever thought about that before? And 9 times out of 10, they will look at you and say, oh my gosh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I did know somebody who went through something like this and they had trouble too. Or, gosh, I've had couples actually look at each other and kind of laugh and say, oh my gosh, this makes us feel so good. Okay, so here we are. Defenses down. Oh, I hear Andy. Here he comes. Hi, Andy. All right, number 3, we save this for last. And the reason we save this for last, I'm going to reiterate this, is because if you start with the problem, if you slam them with the problem, those defenses are going to go up. We know they have a problem. They know they have a problem, right? They wouldn't be there spending this money or taking time off from work or whatever if they didn't have a problem. So this is not going to be news to them, right? So you look at this and you say, so I've saved this for last. And here's, I guess what I've noticed is, you are drinking and driving, or you are sending nude pictures to your colleagues in the office, or you did punch your teacher. And so that is something that counseling can help. I mean, I'm willing to help you with that. Is that a goal? Would you like to work on that? Well, if you've done your job with these other 2 points, they're going to look at you. And even if it's just like, yeah, whatever, that's still kind of a yes. So is, well, I guess I've thought about it before. I don't think I have a problem. I just think everybody's too sensitive. But yeah, I should probably look at it. I mean, even if you get that, you have just gotten buy-in. You've gotten a little glimmer of motivation, right? You've found some initiative in there. And then here's the key, especially new counselors, don't dwell on it. Don't do anything else. You stop and you say, great, here's what I'd like you to do. Here's some homework, something I'd like you to read, something I'd like you to research on the internet, here's a podcast I'd like you to check out. When you come back, we will course correct based on your feedback. Tell me what resonates with you. Because what they're going to do now is they're going to test you, right? You may give them a podcast on how much is too much to drink. You may tell them to read a book about the impact of sending dick pics to their, whatever. You may give them a worksheet on cognitive distortions. This is my favorite. I'll show you this one. Let me screen share. There it is. I send my clients home with this a lot. It's a 2-page little cognitive distortion worksheet. And I'll say, take this home. Just kind of have some fun. See how many times you do this. Or, if it's an adolescent, I love giving this to them and saying, notice how many times your mom or dad or your brother or sister or your aunt or uncle or grandmother does this. And again, what we're telling them is, you aren't the only one struggling, right? You're just the one who showed up today. Good for you. If you're a supervisor, you may have noticed my Dropbox. This is something that I do highly recommend that you do. I have a ton of resources in something called treatment resources. And I have treatment resources for clients and professionals, and it's easy to share with your supervisees, right? If you've got stuff for clients, I got a ton of stuff. So if you're a supervisor, take the time and make that for your supervisees. All right. So we're getting to the end here. My goal today was to get you through the 3-point wrap up, the why we do it, how it helps turn a reluctant client, hopefully, into a more motivated client. You will have this video, and you will also, if you missed it, tell a friend. They can just listen to the podcast tonight, no screen shares, or you can read the blog tomorrow. So I'm going to turn off the recording and the live stream and take some questions. So you guys have a great day. If you want to ask questions, please stick around. This is Dr. Kate Walker in the Step It Up training. Thank you guys for joining.